Good evening. Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming out on this beautiful spring night. I'm seeing the snow fall as I stand here, but thank you, because I'm sure it'll prove to be a very interesting evening. Before we begin our program, I do have some announcements to make. The first one is, have you ever thought about being a docent or a tour guide at the Pioneer House and Blacksmith Shop? We're always looking for new recruits, and I am having an open house at the complex on April 20th from 10 to noon. And it's for people who maybe are just interested in finding out about how to become a tour guide there, or people who have in the past volunteered and will have kind of a new training session, because there are some changes in the Pioneer House. We have opened up the second floor with the second bedroom, and we're thrilled about that. We got another antique oak bed, and we'll be displaying a lot of the kind of women's accoutrements and bridal gowns and things like that for the display and for upstairs in the bedroom. So if you can come, we'll have coffee and donuts, and just if you're just curious and just want to take a private tour or find out more about becoming a volunteer, we would love to have you there. Secondly, there are sign-up sheets in the back for volunteering at the farmers market on Thursday nights. We're there, and we have a table set up where we sell some of our booklets and periodicals, and just have information about the town. And also we show the Pioneer House and Blacksmith Shop then. So if you're interested in that, there are sign-up sheets for that, as well as for the Saturday, April 20th presentation. Also, let's see, what else do I have? Tonight, we have to do an important thing. We have to have nominations for next year's board. It would be from 2024 to 2025. Dan Reardon is going to present the slate of officers, and he's also going to ask if there's any nominations from the floor. So he'll do that now, Dan. And since Dan is up there, I guess I'll also say he's going to introduce our speaker tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan. If you have any questions, please see me afterwards for cookies and refreshments in the back, and we can talk more. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. So this is a formality that we're asking for nominations for the 2024 board, and voting will be held 1 month from today. It's going to be on May 2nd. And here are the tentative slate of officers are as follows. For President, Ellen Flesch. For Vice President, Ron Hale. For Treasurer, Julian Rayburn. For Secretary, Deb Meritor. And there are 3 members at large, and we have Cricket Quinn and Gary Muses and Tim Judd. So this is a slate that's been nominated. However, it has to be put to a vote of all the members of the Irondequoit Historical Society. And if anyone wants to add any names right now, raise your hand. Well, I know you're a little shy tonight, so I will be in the back after this evening's meeting. So thank you very much. I'm going to put my other hat on. And I should have said this earlier. Good evening, everyone. Excellent. Tonight we are fortunate to have with us Mr. Greg Merrick, who's been a public servant in our town for over 4 decades. In the early 70s, Greg became an active Ridge Culver volunteer firefighter and still belongs to the Ridge Culver Fire Association as an honorary life member. In the late 70s, Greg served our community as a fire dispatcher for the Rochester Fire Department, followed by dispatcher for the Office of Emergency Communications. In 1994, Greg was hired as the Town of Irondequoit Fire Marshal, where he served for 26 years and retired just a few years ago. Merrick's volunteerism is admirable, serving as an advisor to the Ridge Culver Fire Explorer program, helping teenagers learn what it takes to be a firefighter. He was a founding father of the Irondequoit Volunteer Ambulance, and now it's known as the Irondequoit Ambulance Service. And through the 1980s, Greg was a member of the Irondequoit Police Auxiliary, assisting the police department on several special traffic details and courtroom security. And currently, Greg serves as the town historian, and hopefully he'll serve that role for many years to come. I don't like that look. This evening, Greg will share with us highlights of the Irondequoit Police Department, which is celebrating its 100 years of service to the residents of the town of Irondequoit. He will identify how policing in Irondequoit evolved from just being constables to special police to police officers. Greg will address IPD's historical events, including the first females and how they were accepted into the department. Greg will also touch on the IPD's community events and some of the perils of being a member of the police department. So please help me welcome Mr. Greg Merrick.
I guess I gotta use this, right? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so, thank you, Dan. Historically, I've known Dan for a little while, probably a little over 50 years. So everything I've done, Dan's watched me do. Anyways, I was asked if I could do a little presentation on the Irondequoit Police Department. Now, I was never a police officer in that department or any other department, except for when I was auxiliary, and that was more a security guard than it was a police officer, so. But I know a lot of people in the police department, and over the years, I've known a lot of them. In fact, ironically, when I was a child, 7, 8 years old, I was brought up in Durand Eastman Park because my family used to run the hot dog stands down there, some of you may remember. And Harold McFarland used to come down. And what you're gonna find out is Harold McFarland was the first chief of police. So I've lived long enough now to have known every chief of police that Irondequoit has had. There's one question, and I'll talk about that in a little while. We probably all remember the most popular door signia that they had in the police cars, Irondequoit Police New York with the Indian. And then they got rid of that Indian, and they've had a few other patches since then. And I don't think they even have an Indian now. We have that new, the new police patch that where the land and the waters meet. Something that's probably important to understand, because we're sitting here in a modern facility with a lot of technology, and sometimes I'll say something and you might have problems comprehending it. So I want you to understand, in 1839, when Irondequoit was founded, it went from Lake Ontario, Irondequoit Bay, Genesee River, and when you came down Empire Boulevard, you stayed right on Clifford Avenue, and went all the way over to the river. So at one time, there were 2 residential neighborhoods in the town of Irondequoit. There was the Lakeshore neighborhood, and that was mostly Sea Breeze. Somerville was also residential, but it was more seasonal, summertime, more cottages and things like that. And then the other residence was all those streets that are off of Norton Street, between Norton Street and Clifford Avenue. There were 4 annexations, 4 major annexations that the city of Rochester took over. And one of them was, they went from Norton Street down to Clifford Avenue, and they took all this this property from Irondequoit just before the police department got started. And that took off half of the town's population. The other thing that was important about this time is up along the lakeshore, there were about 7 hotels, restaurants, nightclubs, bars, and Irondequoit and Somerville were destinations, summertime destinations. So if you were down on Culver Road by Lake Bluff, you might have seen this building, but it's been gone since 1936, so you gotta be a little older than I. But that was the first police station. It was only open during the summer, and you see these windows there? There were 2 cells. And what I mean by cells is that they were 2 holding facilities for intoxicated people. One of the articles I read, they indicated that this police station was the size of 2 outhouses. That's how they measured things back then. Not a phone booth, not a small building, but 2 outhouses. The other thing that was interesting to know is that those 2 cells, they had what they called constables. Now, the Irondequoit's first town board meeting was held at Swain's Hotel or Bar and Grill. It was on Ridge and Culver, now where the Walgreens is. And that's where the town used to hold most of its town meetings before it had its own facility. At its first meeting in March of 1839, the town board recommended that they have a police. It wasn't a department of government, but they recommended that there be police officers to patrol the town during the summer months, especially down along the lakeshore. So they came up with 2 right away. So we've had a police officer in Irondequoit, not a part of the government, but authorized by the government to police the lakeshore area since the beginning of the town in 1839. What these 2 constables, and they were constables, by the way, and a constable was an elected position. So I don't know the frequency of their elections, but when their term expired, they had to run again to be a constable. And what powers they had, I'm sure they're not the same powers that we have today, but I know one of their powers from reading the history here was they would go down along the lakeshore, and there was 2 police departments, 2 sets of constables. There was the Sea Breeze, they called them Sea Breeze Police and Somerville Police, but they were constables, elected officials. And they would incarcerate intoxicated people that were bothering these hotels. Because remember, we were a destination location, and you didn't want to have these intoxicated people bothering the guests. So they would put them in these tanks, and if you don't know what that's gonna be like, if you're home before 8, Andy Griffith show is on tonight, 8 o'clock, and at 8:30 on Meet TV. So you can see what that's like. You locked them up, Otis came in, in this case, Otis came in and Andy Mayberry, but in Irondequoit, the constable would put you in the cell, and when you sobered up, let you go. There wasn't any paperwork, it wasn't really an arrest, it was kind of like, yeah, here's a little comfortable place. Wouldn't you like to spend a night there? And remember I said it was only a fair weather police station. Here it is in the winter. They didn't work, and they didn't shovel, and they didn't incarcerate people. You can find information on this. This is 1931, but you can go back into other registers. This is just showing you a register. Here's Culver Road, here's Sea Breeze Park, and you can see up there where it says Ontario Branch, police booth. So in the book, they described it as a booth. There's some other materials described it as a couple outhouses. The sign on the building said police station, so. So what were we doing about police powers in the rest of the town and for all the seasons? New York State Police, this isn't really a replica of the 1920s either. I don't know when this was, but the New York State Police and the Monroe County Sheriff's Office would patrol town of Irondequoit. In 1920, Harold McFarland became one of the first police officers in the town of Irondequoit. He started as the only police officer in the town of Irondequoit. Now, when I was looking through some records, I found that he was sworn in as a peace officer. And whether that was the same as the police or not, but when you read some of these historical manuals that we have in the Historic Society, it identifies him as a police officer. When I was looking in the history here, I saw some, they called them police officers, some called them peace officers, but Harold McFarland was hired in 1921 by the town of Irondequoit as a police officer. And no, it was 1920 he was hired as a police officer. In 1921, they hired 4 other officers to assist him, and they made him a captain. That was the highest rank in the police department. That was in 1920. But I don't think it was called a police department still. It was just, they recognized them as police. So now what you had is in 1900, they had special police. And those were appointed by the town board, but they were volunteers. So your constables were volunteers, and your special police were volunteers, and then the paid officers started coming in around the 1920s. So you're saying, why is it 1920, but 1924 is the 100th anniversary? I'll get to that in a minute. But in 1926, another date, why isn't that the anniversary? Harold McFarland was taken from his captain's position and they made him the police chief. He worked as the police chief until 1933 when his first passion was to raise and breed horses, and he went out in Williamson to raise and breed horses. But after 2 years, that wasn't really what he enjoyed, so he came back to Irondequoit and he got reappointed as the chief of police. If you look into some directories, and back then it wasn't like the phone booth, but it was, you could look up a person's name and find out their address and their spouse's name. And typically back in the 1920s, it was always the male, and so it would have their wife. And then it would talk about what was their position. So during the time that McFarland was out doing his horses, there shows a Willis Crane only in the directory as chief of police. I haven't found any documents when I've been going through them for the town to swear him in as a chief. He's never mentioned anywhere in the police department's history as being the chief, except for in the registry. So Harold McFarland comes back in 1926 and gets reappointed as the chief. So why is 1924 the history of the police department? It's really not a firm date, but what happened in 1924 was, and it's debatable with whatever you're reading, there's different materials out there you can read and it'll give you different answers, but 1924, the town board adopted the police department as a department of government. The police department was no longer an entity of its own, and it wasn't that the town said, you know, we need police officers, so there should be police officers, and so we're gonna elect them, or we're gonna appoint them. Now, they were a department of the town government, and they're gonna be hired. So, 1924, the St. Paul Boulevard Fire Association got started, and at 433 Cooper Road, they took an old house out there and converted it into a firehouse, put one of the fire trucks in there. In the back of that fire station was an office that the police department worked out of. So that was the first police department in 1924, where it had an address and they put a phone in there. Before that, you had to call a constable at home or a special police officer at home, or you had to call the justice of the peace to get the police. Probably you got the state or the sheriff's department, because they also, in Irondequoit, the police didn't work 24 hours yet, it was just a day job. Here's another picture of Harold McFarland, and this is his oath of office. You can't, I don't know if you can see it too well there, but you see this section here with a line through it? Can you see a line through there? That was about being sworn in as being elected. And they just drew a line through there and swore him in as being appointed. This is just some more information about Harold McFarland. And here he is. Remember I said they hired 4 other police officers and he was the captain? So here he is on the motorcycle with the 4 other police officers. And the other thing about the police, it wasn't until the 1947 that the town bought their uniforms. So if you look, you'll notice it's, in this picture, not all the uniforms are uniform, but they're more uniform than like Matt Dillon that just wore the badge on his leather jacket. Harold McFarland was a tough guy and commanded and demanded respect, and he wasn't afraid to tell off politicians or other police chiefs or other figures what he thought. He once got on the sheriff, Al Skinner, some of you may remember Al Skinner, and got on him about putting cars in Irondequoit. If he's gonna fight crime, go fight it where it is, out west, stay out of Irondequoit. He's got his police department to do it. The other thing that he did was, at one time, they listed these 5 guys, 10 wheels. That's how they got a name, 5 guys, 10 wheels. They all drove motorcycles. So when you were hired as a police officer in 1924, you had to buy your motorcycle and buy your uniforms. I don't know what a motorcycle cost back then. But what happened in the winter? They had a sidecar. And they rode these motorcycles through all seasons, but were still only daytime police, so they didn't drive them at night. This is in 1925. These are 2 of the police officers, Joe Harder and Ed Palm, and they've shown up in a few other events throughout the town, but it just shows you that, you know, look at their uniform. Now they're wearing bow ties. Here is Tom Broderick got elected as the town supervisor in 1926, I think it was, or 28. But this is a picture from 1928 with him and McFarland on the bike. And this is behind the St. Paul Firehouse. And this is the front of the firehouse. The bigger picture is the front of the firehouse. That's St. Paul's first engine, if you're interested. First big engine. They had some smaller things. In 1928, here's an interesting thing. When they hired police officers, they didn't get rid of their constables, they didn't get rid of their special police. Constables and special police, remember, they were the volunteers. Constables were elected, special police were appointed by the town board, but your police officers now were hired by the town board. And I can't read all these names, and maybe I could here on this picture, but there they are in their titles. And so when they hired people, they didn't get rid of the rest of them, you just stayed on. But what did change, our police officers became more of the law enforcement, which big deal. You know what their law enforcement consisted of back in 1920s? Traffic, mostly. And the constables took care of the intoxes down on the lake. So it wasn't like we know police work today. But one of the other things that happened here in this picture was Chief McFarland required that all the constables, all the special police, and all the police officers wore uniforms. Before that, it might have been a badge they carried, it might have been they just told you they were the police and you had to believe them. And you probably would believe them because you called them at home to get their services. Here's an interesting thing. I don't want you going down to the river tonight and going scuba diving. But in 1940, this is a picture in the 1940s, where the police would take their confiscated weapons, and these were BB guns, air rifles, shotguns, and they would destroy them with a sledgehammer, and then in the dark of the night, go down and dump them in the riverbed. In 1928, we would know this today as Adrian Jules Tailoring up on Ridge Road. But at that time, Irondequoit rented some space on the first floor for town offices, and the police department went in. There's a little garage like here. It was where the police department went, and you can see there's a sign, police. So now they've moved out of the St. Paul Firehouse, and they've moved into Ridge Road to be with the town government. Here's another interesting thing. The police officers had to know what they were looking for, so here's a couple of marijuana plants planted in front of the police department so that the police officers would know what it was looking for. And here's some fancy record keeping for the time. This was a uniform traffic ticket. And this is from the 40s. 1951, I'm going to segue a little bit. Tom Broderick was instrumental in starting the Irondequoit Town Hall. He felt that that's where it needed to be. We needed to not rent space, we needed to have our own space, it needed to be centralized. And believe it or not, 1280 Titus Avenue, right next door, was pretty central to the town. So he had funds to build the town hall, and through his last 8 years, 10 years, he worked on getting architects, engineers, contractors to build the town hall. He was there the day that they did the shovel in the ground, but the day they did the ribbon cutting, he had passed about 4 months before, so he never saw the town hall in its completed state. But the police department was given the basement level from the front on the west side of the town hall. This was the police department in 1951. And it remained that section until 1977, when they took over the entire basement. The department was growing and they needed more space, and under Don Deming's administration, they increased the police department. It didn't move again, though, by the way, until it went to this back location, and that was, I think, 1990. Well, I told you about Harold McFarland a little bit. Now it's 1966, and Harold was one of these guys, you didn't ask him a question, because if he didn't think you needed to know, he didn't tell you. Remember, he already told the sheriff, get the cars out of town. He would tell politicians, we don't need police cars because we don't have anything in the town that you can go fast enough to chase. We're gonna keep the iron, he called them iron horses, the motorcycles, and the guys will just dress a little warmer in the winter. So here it is on October 19th, 1966. Harold McFarland is recognized by the Lakeshore Rochester Kiwanis Club and by their president, and he's been given the it was a Citizens Award, Distinguished Service Award. And when he accepted that award, he announced his retirement. So he left in January. Well, his last day was December 31st, 1966. And then came Chief Stuart LeBaron. Stuart LeBaron was a lieutenant at the time that he got promoted to chief, but they didn't have the position of captain at that time. Some of the things that were interesting, Stu LeBaron became a police officer in 1940. He was appointed sergeant in 1947, Irondequoit's first sergeant. A lieutenant in 1956, he made chief in 1966, retiring in 1976. Stu LeBaron was a well-educated man, and unlike Harold McFarland, he thought it was necessary that the police end up going to school. He was an advocate for continuing education. In fact, he became a state instructor and graduated from the University of, or the State University of Brockport, or what do they call that now? It's Brockport College. SUNY Brockport, thank you. And when he graduated, he became an instructor. And he came to the town of Irondequoit Town Board meeting and asked authorization to be an adjunct instructor for Brockport State, and he taught law enforcement classes for Brockport College while he was still chief. When he retired, William Fry took over as chief. He was chief from 1959 until 2004. A lot of the older police officers today on the job were probably hired by him. Then after Chief Fry, then it was Chief Robert Longdew, then Chief Boyan, then Chief Richard Tantello, who left as chief of the Irondequoit Police Department to become the Public Safety Director of Monroe County, in which that's his current position. Then Al Laird, and then he retired. We have our current chief, which I don't have a picture of. He's hard to capture. But some of the programs that the Irondequoit Police had was the Police Nightstick Club, which is their PBA and union, was organized in 1947 under McFarland's administration. In 1954, the town of Irondequoit passed a bicycle registration and licensing code. So the yellow one here, well, the red one was a sticker that went on your bike. And then they came out with license plates. And I happen to have them here. I'll pass them around. A lot of people would think, well, these are motorcycle license plates. No, these were bicycle license plates. And every 2 years, you had to bring your bicycle. If you were a student in the school, the police department would come out, do the inspections, and then give you a license. And the licenses were kept on file in the police department. And if your bike was stolen, or if it was found by the police, they could locate the owner of the bike by the license plate. A lot more honesty among the criminals back then, because they didn't scrape the license off or take the plate off, you know? Left them on so the police could find it. The two officers that did most of that were Officer Ed Rockefeller and Richard Colucci. And they were also, in the summertime, they rode motorcycles most of their career in the town of Irondequoit. The Irondequoit Police Department also, from the 1960s until about the mid-1990s, had an explorer post. And explorers are a division of the Boy Scouts of America, and they're youth between the ages of 14 and 18, now I think it's 21, that had an interest in specialized work. Your police departments, your fire departments, mostly were the ones that had this, the Explorer post back in the beginning, but now there's an Explorer post over at the Seneca Park Zoo, and they've got them for engineering and architecture, and it's a great opportunity for young people to look into a career they might be interested in, and find out maybe they're not. They also sponsor an auxiliary police, which now, believe it or not, is called a special police. They're not called auxiliary, they're called special, but it's different than the special police that they started with back in the 1920s. And so here is Captain Len Levy. He was the captain for many, many years of the auxiliary police. And his lieutenant to the far right, that was Bill Sharp. And Bill Sharp was also a Ridge Culver firefighter, and he worked for the Rochester Gas and Electric, and here they are giving an award to one of their members who had served a number of years and now was retiring. When I say retiring, you basically resign because you're not getting when you're a volunteer, you're not getting any pension. Here's another picture of that same unit. There's Captain Levy on the left, and then you'll see they had this van, and there's some of the special police. This was on a 4th of July in about 1975 or 76, something like that, when the special police would supplement the police department, and typically what they did is they would have a police officer and an auxiliary police walk together on the grounds for security during the 4th of July, or they would do traffic, they would park cars. Irondequoit also at one point, this is in 1980, they had a police officer, Terry Young, some of you may have known her. Some may have known her because she was friends, some may have known her because she liked a lot of tickets to write. But she also liked to ride a horse. And so here she is on her horse. The Irondequoit Police Department would pay for her equipment, her helmet and whatever else the horse needed to become a police horse. And she would take care of the horse. It was her horse, but when special events came up, Kiddie's Fun Day being one of them, sometimes the parade, she would bring the horse to the parade or to Kiddie's Fun Day. Kiddie's Fun Day. This is a ticket of what Kiddie's Fun Day was. How many people here remember or know of Kiddie's Fun Day? Yeah. Kiddie's Fun Day started in 1949, and it was by the Irondequoit Police Nightstick Club. And what they would do is they would mail out a mailing sometime around May, and they would ask for donations, and you would send your donations in, and they would supply the elementary age students of Irondequoit a ticket to Sea Breeze Park. It was the 3rd Tuesday of each month, of June of each year, that month. And I don't know how many, I would like to say all, but the police all volunteered their time, but it was an opportunity for the police to interact with the elementary school students, kindergarten to 6th grade. And they would get these tickets, and they would have 3,000, 4,000 students attend these Kiddie's Fun Days toward the end. You got 4 free rides, a free hot dog, a free ice cream, and a free Coke. And if you knew a cop, you maybe got another ticket. Those were the tickets you really tried to get. Now you also notice, it says Dreamland Park up there, Kiddie's Fun Day, Dreamland Park. When Sea Breeze originally opened, it opened as Sea Breeze, one word, Sea Breeze Amusement Park. Then it went over to Dreamland Park. And now it's back to Sea Breeze, but it's 2 words, Sea Breeze Amusement Park. Same park, but that was a ticket. What would happen is the police would buy or get donated 12 bikes, and those were door prizes, which you can see on the bottom. If you filled out your name and put it in the door prize, you had a chance to win a bike or other prizes. So on the picture on the left, they're calling out winners for the prizes. The picture on the right, that's the officer on the left is Robert Rivard, and then the officer on the right is Matt Zambricki. If you knew Matt Zambricki, you'd wonder why he was at the Kiddie's Fun Day. Because he had a tough personality. He came from the McFarland mold. Again, here's another copy of the police pulling names out. I think what they did is they had, I don't know if it was by each school or by each grade, they put the tickets into the box and they would pull it out. And then here's Bob Rivard again with one of the children on his motorcycle. Al DiAgostino is speaking to one of the kids at one of the entrances to the ride. And then over here, I thought this was neat because Sea Breeze Amusement Park, they had this little cart that was on a track. You know, you really thought you were driving it, but you weren't. It had a stake in the ground and it went like a chain. If you were in a car wash, you didn't leave. But you see the building in the back? Sea Breeze Amusement Park designed that building after Jim and Gil's gas station. I don't know how many people remember Jim and Gil's gas station, but it was a kind of a landmark of its own down in Sea Breeze. In the Irondequoit Police Department's history, they've had 2 officers that were shot. They've had 1 crossing guard that was what we call LODD, line of duty death, that was killed while performing their duty. And we've had other officers that were shot at. So the first officer to be shot in Irondequoit was Gino Gamero. Gino was in a patrol car on Empire Boulevard and Culver Road and monitoring a city police frequency. And they had an alarm at the jewelry store just up the road on Culver Road by Merchants. So Gino took a ride up there and got out of his car. Now he's going southbound on Culver Road. He parks on the west side of the road, gets out of his car and walks across the street to the jewelry store. Well, the alarm wasn't false. And two guys come out of the jewelry store with their guns, see Gino, and they shoot him. He got shot in the thigh, and he went down, but he was able to fire back. And here's where it's not known which, I don't know which officer got the hit, but in the jewelry store that day was an off-duty city police officer. So as these men were leaving the bank, he pulls his gun and chases them out the door. They see Gino in a uniform as a police officer, they shoot him. Now there's a crossfire of shooting going on. Gino's shooting at the suspects, the off-duty officer from the city is shooting at them, and the city officer, Sergeant Taylor, pulls up and sees the shooting going on. He gets involved, but he also gets shot. So there were two officers shot. Gino was in the hospital for a little while, probably about a month. He returned to the job. His first day back was in 1966 in January, and it was the day of the January blizzard. Yeah. We also, Irondequoit had two women that came in the police department, and they were the first two women, so surprise.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Sue Erblin, and I am the 25-year-old in this picture. Judy and I were hired in 1977. I went through a 16-week training academy, which at the time was at Monroe Community College. It's now at the Public Safety Training Center on Scottsville Road. But I went through the academy. They really weren't quite sure what to do with two females, never had women in the department before. So they asked us, do you want to wear pants or do you want to wear a skirt? And we both thought, wouldn't be very practical to chase after someone or climb a fence with a skirt on. So we opted for pants. And for the first few years, we wore pretty much men's clothes. And it included even bulletproof vests, which have been perfected since then. But I went through the academy, came out in December of 1977. We now have a full training program, but at the time I just rode with two senior officers for 2 weeks on nights, 2 weeks on afternoons, and then they put me by myself on afternoons. My sergeant at the time, my first call in my zone was a domestic dispute. Wouldn't send me. Call came in for me, but he sent two male officers instead. So they were a little bit leery about females at the time and what we could actually do on the job. So it took some getting used to us and us getting used to them. But I retired in March of 2008 after 30 years on the police department as a sergeant. It was an interesting job, never a dull moment. And I could say it was a good choice for me.
Thank you. I thought she could explain it better than I could. And when we're done, if you have any questions for Sue, she'll stick around for a few minutes and be happy to answer them. Now, here was the second officer that was shot. This was Mark Bonsignor. Mark was called to a prowler call on a Friday night. The address was, it was 2092, not 292, typo. 2092 Titus Avenue. And that address was known to the police because of some domestics there in the prior. And so Mark shows up, it's about 11:30 on a Friday night, and there's three other cars come in on this job with him, and he goes in the backyard and he sees the suspect and he starts to give foot chase. and he gets to the backyard where there's some bushes, and they go to apprehend him, put him in custody, and there's a struggle. And the two officers are fighting, and the suspect was able to pull the gun out of the holster from Mark's holster and shoot him in the leg. Now, he got shot right near the artery on the right thigh, and he went down, and the other officers were able to apprehend the suspect, put him into custody. The suspect, I have him named here, you can read it in the paper, but it was Gary Leo Arena. Mark went to school with Gary. Well, Mark was out of work for quite a while, and how long, I don't know. But that was the second officer that was shot in the line of duty, so. Now, we have another shooting at an officer.
Your hair was a lot darker than.
I'm Mike DiGiovanni, and I spent almost 40 years at the Irondequoit Police Department. I retired in July of 2017. Just to go back a little further, Sue came on the job before me. I'm younger. It's been an interesting career, but in that picture, yeah, I did have black hair and I was 29 years old at the time. I'm only like 20 years older now, so I've aged well. But this particular incident happened on Empire Boulevard. If anybody was, excuse me, sorry. Anybody remember the Blue Gardenia restaurant in Empire Plaza, Empire Boulevard? Now it's the Empire Bingo, the famous Empire Bingo. When I came on the job, the biggest thing going on around Rochester was the mob and prostitution, gambling, some drugs and that kind of thing. And I can recall this. I can remember when I was in the police academy, when all this incident happened, by the way, I lived on Cliffordale Park, which was the next block over from the Blue Gardenia. So this happened right in my backyard, which really annoyed me when I thought about all this. But when I was in the police academy, they were having bombings downtown, and you heard about all the CMEGs, cars, and all this. Before I went to the academy one day, there was an explosion that shook our windows on the house at Cliffordale Park. So it was like almost I was destined to meet these people. But what happened when the mob was really, really getting active in the early 80s, we didn't have all the computers that we had now, so they used to give us lists of cars and the mobsters' locations. And mobsters, a lot of them lived in the area that I worked. I worked the southeast side of Irondequoit. And we used to take the little note papers and we'd go around and we'd see all these mobsters, get job cards, write reports on them and stuff like that. So what happens one night, it's December 17th, 1981. Never forget the day. In fact, when I thought about this and when I was thinking about coming here tonight, I can remember going to work that day. And we were in the basement of the town hall. And I can remember going to work just having the feeling that something wasn't right that day. And this particular patrol car that you see, this was a brand new car. And the sergeant was off. The car I usually drive had been piled up in a collision shop. And the lieutenant comes up to me, throws the sergeant's keys on the table and says, DiGiovanni, take the 7-Eleven car and don't crack it up. He goes, don't mess it up. And he walks away. So I go, well, whatever. So that particular day, at night, the weather got really bad. And my patrol area beat was, from Eastridge Road to the Bay, all the way up to the Wood Road, down to the town line and coming back. So I had that whole east section. And the weather was really bad. And I'll say this note, I just left my house because they allowed you to go home and have dinner. So I left the house after dinner. Bad habit my wife had, which she got rid of after, she used to leave the police scanner on so that she would know when I called out for a 38, which was dinner. You just call out and then you call on the phone and tell them where you were, the dispatcher knew. So what happens is I get back in the car, it's snowing, and I go, let me drive around. I go down by the bay and it really got bad, and I go, this police car isn't gonna make it up the hill on Bayfront South. It's just not gonna do it. So I says, I better get out of here. So I remember driving up Fishtail and just making it up the hill, and I said to myself, the liquor store on Empire Boulevard always got robbed. A lot of times when I was on job, when the weather was bad, rain and snow, and so I go, it ain't happening tonight. I says, I'm going by the liquor store. And right now it's the,
Pizza, yeah, no.
What's his name there?
Trivia question, what's the,
No, that's in the place.
There's a pizza place.
the pizza? Guidas. Yep.
So what happens is, I come up Empire Boulevard, I'm going west. I turn into Empire Plaza. Now Empire Plaza used to have Security Trust, Rite Aid, and supermarket, Star. And then the Blue Gardenia, Ben Manigazzi's place. And I used to watch that place for mob activity too. So I'm driving in, it's snowing really bad. And I'm driving and this Cadillac comes up and it's fishtailing, no lights on the car. And I go, wow, we're gonna stop this car, I can remember. As I'm driving by the car, the driver of the car is just looking straight, and the passenger of the car has got a hat on, and I see him do this. And he looks at me. Our eyes meet, and I go, wow, that's enough of this. I spin the car around because it was so slippery there, and you didn't have any of that traction control, so these cars were great for doing donuts and stuff like that, So out I go to the exit, and I gotta stop, because I'm going out the entrance. And I look over to my left, and there's the Laurelton Firehouse there, okay, which is now the Irondequoit Fire Department, right? And I can see the traffic light, and I can see this Cadillac just whipping out, and it gets into an accident, okay? Hits a car, so I'm ready to call the accident out, and the car ends up, the driver of the car is actually driver's side facing me, and I can see the passenger gets out, and he starts running, and he runs around the front of the car, and he starts heading east. And at the same time, I see the guy that was in the car, and he comes out of the passenger side, and he's right at the back of the car. He had like a 3/4 length jacket on, and I can see he's got a shotgun in his hand. And the shotgun he had, I remember, had no stock on it for anybody that hunts. It had no wood on the action, it was all the metal. The shotgun was just there. So what happens is instantaneously, he's fired, he raises the gun. And I counted the shots, because in the academy, they always drilled in your head. You count their shots, you count yours. Which was probably one of the reasons why it saved my life. And so he fires once, and I said, well, I gotta get out of this car. I'm kicking open the door, and I couldn't even get to the radio. I get out of the car, and I figure he's running up on the car, and my thought was, well, he's gonna take me out, I'm taking him with me. Simple as that. So he's out there, he's still firing at the car. Another important thing that, I told you that was a new car, right? And that new car, if you go back to that, it had one of these newer light racks on with all the white lights in it. It had double headlights, and the high beams, they rigged them up so they would flash. So they would blind you. And then they always drilled in our head at the academy, okay? Turn your spotlight on, and Sue will tell you, when you work nights and then you go on the afternoons and you stop a car, you'll know the night cop because you'll see a spotlight on, even if it's daytime. It just happens, okay? So what happens is he fires at me, I fired him, I see him lurch forward, so I know I hit him. But I also know all we had was 6-shot revolvers, and I knew that some of the rounds had hit the quarter panel of the car. So I remember the instructor just, get up on target. So I do my thing. I reload the gun without thinking. I tell you what, I don't remember unsnapping it out of the holster, taking it on, and putting it back in. But when I took it out, it was loaded. And I went across the dashboard because they used to have the shotgun. Well, it was mounted right here. So I just got out, grabbed the shotgun, wrapped around in it, and came looking, and they're both gone. So I got on the radio, called it in, and first car up was Monroe County Sheriff's Officer, Deputy Dave Matucci. He came up, and a bunch of other cars came, and we did something that wouldn't happen today in police work, but I was one of the officers that went on and started tracking. And I captured the first suspect. Here, let's see if I can take these out for you. I captured, with 2 other officers, I captured the first suspect. We chased him. We chased the first suspect over to, at the time, 590 used to be Route 47. And then we have now it's the Laurelton Party School up on Hellendale Road. It used to be the Hellendale Road School. We tracked this guy, and it was the picture with the thing. It was Louis DeGiulio with the Irondequoit holding his numbers and date. And we catch him in the bushes. And he's alive today only because of an officer that stopped me from shooting him. Because Steve got there and he was rustling around, I had a shotgun, and we were able to grab him and not shoot him. So we handcuff him, bring him back. Prior to going out to track this guy, when I came out, where the driver had slipped. They were wearing, both of them, by the way, idiots, wearing leather-soled shoes. It's the middle of the winter, folks, So DeGiulio falls, and you can see his imprint like this in the snow. And I look, and there's a gun, and you can see like a belt. So he dropped his gun. So all I remember was them screaming at us in the academy about evidence. So I go in the police car, grab my hat, and throw it over the gun, because I didn't want to lose any evidence, So basically what happens is we never actually found the suspect until Easter of 1982. So this incident happened December 17th, 1981, at like 6:40 at night. And he gets away. And anybody familiar with the Boulevard Grill that's now closed? Well, the investigation got going, and they found out he doubled back while everybody was searching for him. He goes into the Boulevard Grill, okay? That's John Joseph Sullivan, and he uses the phone, and we later learned that these 2 individuals, Thomas Torpy and Thomas Taylor, went there and picked him up. Now, talk about the gang that couldn't shoot straight. On the investigation, they found that the driver and the passenger were doing cocaine before they went and committed a homicide in front of the Blue Gardenia restaurant, okay? And they killed John Fiorino. I did not know that happened. Did not know at all. And I found that out later after the whole incident came down. So basically what happened is, Sullivan gets away, DiGiulio gets taken into custody, and of course, he flips and becomes a witness, so he doesn't have to go to jail for the rest of his life. You know, I was always convinced that Sullivan would come around, would come back, and I'm a runner, and for a long time after that, I used to go out and run, and I'd run with a gun, because it was in my neighborhood. Well, lo and behold, around Easter time in 1982, the FBI is doing an undercover operation, which they never bothered sharing the information with Irondequoit, which they should have. And anybody know where the Denonville is, down on Empire Boulevard? Go down the hill? Denonville Inn, it's not that anymore, it's something else. And it's by that Sunrise Plaza, right before you get Eastway Plaza and the Eastway Wegmans. So what happens is, what the investigation ended up turning out that he came back to Rochester because these two guys, they were supposed to pay him for the hit. He didn't pay him. So the intelligence and the investigation determined that he came back because he was gonna kill these two guys. And the investigation revealed that one of these two guys tipped off the police that he was gonna be at the Denonville. So what happens one day, he's with his girlfriend, and he's coming out, they're getting ready to leave. Everybody jumps in and scoots in and grabs him. And in his vehicle, he had a bulletproof vest with a bullet in it. Okay? So, the only thing I'll tell you about this is that as of today, DiGiulio is still alive, and he's was in the witness protection program in Las Vegas. He did 5 years, and as soon as he got out, he got arrested. So who knows where he is? Joseph John Sullivan, he died in prison. By the way, he's one of when this incident happened, he had done a bank robbery in Utica, then went down to Long Island and he tried to kill a guy, and the guy lived. And I ended up having to go to Long Island because of the car that he was driving, the Cadillac, he had the gun he used to shoot the guy. And also in the car was money from a bank robbery he did in Utica. So I ended up having to travel all along the state to get it. So he died in prison of cancer, like early 90s. These guys were in trouble on and off after they got out. And Torpy died in 2019, and Taylor died in 2021. So as you can tell over the years, I kind of kept track of what was going on with them. But you know, everybody just thought, you know, Irondequoit back in the day was just nothing going on, all right? But a lot of things were happening. And you know, it's just this guy, he was a hired killer. And here's the ironic thing, you know, I did a little research on him, and all the police officers that took care of him in prisons and transporting him and everything used to keep in touch with me. His father was a decorated New York City police detective. And he did that. And when he escaped from jail, his wife, they ended up arresting her. She was the one that everybody would go to, and she'd set up the hits. You know? So it was kind of a big operation, but that kind of came crashing down in Rochester, you know, for the mob back then, because basically the 70s and 80s were just bad. You know, the only thing is supposedly, you know, all the mobsters would tell you, and I'd have to run into these people in the courtroom, and some of them, like Red Rosati, who lived 4 blocks away, he'd see me in a coffee shop, apologize. They shouldn't do that. They shouldn't do that to the police. You know, that's our rule. We don't do this. They're criminals. What's their rule? You know, but they were just out of control. So, So I survived that night because I think somebody was watching out for me. It wasn't my time. The training I had, the equipment I had made the difference. Well, and that's that.
Did the sergeant get a new car?
Well, I'll tell you what, over my career, let me see, how many chiefs have I worked for? Bill Fry, Bob Longdu, Dick Boyan, Rich Stantello. That's it, you know, but I worked for Bill Fry for 20 years, great guy. And he was very particular about the police cars, but he was really good to me the other night. Yeah, he really was. But, you know, a lot of things have changed, as Greg says, the information we have now and the information technology that you have and what you would never do, you know, we were just cops, you know, and something happens, you were taught, chase them and get them. That would never happen today. Police officer gets involved in a shooting, they take him right out of there. And, you know, everybody else does the investigation. And, you know, on hindsight, you look back, but that was, you know, it's gonna be, this year it'll be 43 years that happened. So 43 years ago, that's how we did our job.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
So Flo, do you want to stand up and show them what a radio listener looks like? Just, that's Mike's wife, she endured that.
Take the radio right out. I'm still wrapped it up in garbage.
Okay, so now we've had 2 officers shot and 1 shot at, and now we get to Bertha Gowns. Bertha Gowns was a crossing guard, and she crossed the students on St. Paul Boulevard and Chestnut Hill Drive, thank you. And this one particular afternoon, she was out there crossing them, and she had 3 other students that were crossing the street, and she saw this car and she knew it wasn't gonna stop. She pushed the kids, and they only got hit by a little bit, but she took the brunt of the car. And she never gained consciousness, and for 5.5 years, she laid in the Brightonian nursing home in a coma until the day she died. But she did save these 3 girls' lives. I did do a little research on them, and I was gonna put it in the presentation, but I was running out of time. And, but they're all adults, they all have their own children. And there was a plaque, this one over here, if you go down to that intersection, you'll see this on one of the poles down there by the light pole. They dedicated that intersection for Bertha Gowns. And when these 3 girls that were invited to come back for the ceremony for that plaque, some of them did, I think 2 of them came back. And they went to the cemetery and visited the gravesite. Okay, Irondequoit also had a pistol team. This is in 1980. Their pistol team was the #1 team. This is a picture of them after a meet in Toronto, Canada. They used to travel all over New York State and Ontario, Province of Ontario, and did competition with their pistols. And Irondequoit was known as having a cracked pistol team. And I mean crack, I mean right on, sharp. They won over 500, in 10 years, they won over 500 trophies, plaques, and awards. And then later on in 2002, this is Memorial Day 2002, they had an honor guard. And they started marching in the Memorial Day Parade, the 4th of July Parade, the Veterans Day ceremonies at the Town Hall, and other activities as they were invited. The Irondequoit Police Honor Guard would go, which Mike was also a member. In 1992, the police department got accredited. Now, I don't know what you know about accreditation, but it's about the highest rank that you can have. It's the highest honor you can have, and it has a lot of perks. What I mean by perks is there's training, there's documentation, there's all kinds of things that have to go into being accredited. And your training is a part of it, documenting your training, how your officers treat the public, how you keep your records, how you're dispatched, how you respond, what kind of equipment you carry. That all goes into accreditation. And actually, and Mike and Sue, if I'm wrong, but doesn't it impact, potentially impact the insurance rates of the town for, if you're accredited police department, you have a better rate? Here's a copy of a tie bar and accreditation. This here was when this accreditation was given out when they got accredited to all the officers that were here. And then this other one down here, I think that they still wear them, right? So if you come on the police department today as an officer, you get that to wear above your name tag, letting the public know you are an accredited agency. That's about it. This one here I put in, I didn't finish it, but that's the police have a lot of problems with negotiating sometimes. They were always trying to get more people. Some of the problems that we've had in the history of Irondequoit was the mall took up a lot of our resources for the police department. And so they tried to get more officers hired to cover the mall situation. There were some other, and if you know of any, Sue or Mike, and you want to say something, but in this particular case, this is back in the 70s. They actually picketed during one of the town board meetings. But there was always, they always had to fight for pay raises. They always had to fight for new guns or uniforms, which I know, Mike, you were on those committees, president of the union. It was always an uphill battle. It's only been in most recent years that I can think of, and if I'm wrong, that the police department's had any respect or has had the same level of respect from the town board or the governing board. And that's because of the way things are going through the community. How ironic, Harold McFarland said that the police department should not be run by the sheriff's department should not be run by the sheriff. He did support a countywide police agency, but he said it should be under a board with a police commissioner and not under a political entity. And they should do police work. And that was how Chief McFarland, our first chief, saw the police department. So he supported countywide police agency as opposed to town police departments, but didn't believe a sheriff should do it because the sheriff is elected and that's a political appointment. And then there's those ramifications, you know, you always have to pay somebody back. There's so much more. I didn't want to put it in the program because I didn't want to run all night, but if you'd like to speak to anybody, if you have any questions, please, we got my two guest speakers. I thank you, Sue, I thank you, Mike, and Flo, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but thank you for coming in here tonight. I've known them all since they started on the job, and what a great group of people, what a great group of people they've worked with. So if you have any questions to Mike or Sue, or hey, here's a bonus. If you want to ask the wife of a police officer what she hears and how she feels, there's a bonus. I didn't plan that tonight. Mike surprised me. Thank you. I do have some stuff on the table up here. Not a lot, but a few. We did put a display in the library, and you still got a few minutes to go look at it if you want. The Historical Society and the Ukrainian organization, I don't know if it's a club or what it is, we share a display case out here in the library. And this month we did the police display. And so they have some of the old uniforms. A couple of things I didn't say in the presentation, but I got it in my head, I'll remember it. So in 1979, they went from a blue and gray uniform that they had when McFarland made the police go to, I'm sorry, green and gray, green. When McFarland, as the chief, made all the police officers have a uniform, and in 1947, when the town bought them, They went to the green and gray because they were at the time, they were the colors of the state police. McFarland served 1 year, 1919, in the state police before he came to Irondequoit in 1920. So they wore those green and gray uniforms for many years. In 1979, they went to the traditional blue. And then in 1999, they went from the Indian patch to the patch that they currently wear. And I don't have that patch here, I'm sorry. But we do have some other things up on the board here, on the table. We have some badges, and if you want to come up, there's a shirt badge, that's a pin on. There's a jacket badge, it's a pin on. There's a hat badge, that's an attachment. And there's a clip badge, which was used mostly by investigators or police officers that were called back off duty because of their need to be at a scene or their need to be backing up officers that were at a scene for identification. They would slip it on their belt or wear it on a lanyard around their neck. So I have those types of badges up here if you want to take a look at them. If you have any questions, I know Sue and Mike are here for a little while. Thank you so much. Yes?
Greg, I really liked the introduction that Dan gave you, but he left off two important jobs that you're currently doing that need to be mentioned. And one is that you're an advisor to the Irondequoit Historical Society, and you come to every one of the board meetings. And you're also an advisor to the Irondequoit Historical Commission, and you go to all of their meetings and keep both organizations hopefully on track.
Thank you. Can I just make one more introduction? We have a guest that I'd like to introduce, Andre, our town supervisor. Andre Evans, thank you.
Yes.